Welcome back. And now we are in the inspirational portion of the Believe Show, and I'm excited because I have Marc Meyer with me all the way from Florida. Good morning.
Good morning, Barbara. It's great to be with you.
Well, I'm happy to have you with me because I love inspirational things. And of course, the very first time that I saw a press release saying Tai Chi, the story of a Chinese master in America, you already had me hooked because I've taken Tai Chi and I'm embarrassed to tell you that I didn't seem to have the right coordination, but I knew that this had to be a calming and inspirational story.
Yes, well, Tai Chi takes a long time to learn, and it takes a long time to master, and a lot of people just don't have the patience for it in the West. You really have to put the time in.
You do, and you actually are a master yourself.
Well, I'm a teacher. I started teaching Tai Chi shortly after I learned it. I took a summer off to learn it, and it took me a long time to really grasp all the subtlety that I would be able to teach. And they say it takes, the Chinese say it takes 2 lifetimes to learn Tai Chi.
I read that and I thought that I was already well into the first one and I wasn't doing very well, but I so respect it. It has such wonderful movement. And for our listeners, tell them what Tai Chi actually is.
Well, once I started teaching Tai Chi, many people asked me questions about it. What is it? Is it a spiritual practice? Is it meditation? And one man even told me he thought it was esoteric. And that's where the seed of the idea to write a novel about Tai Chi came in, is I thought that if I could craft a family story around it with some interesting and memorable characters, that I could slip in some truths about it at the same time so people could really learn about it. And what Tai Chi is, basically, is it's a martial arts exercise that the Chinese turned into an exercise for health. And it's been practiced for some 4,000 years, and slowly but surely all these health attributes became attached to it, and people found out that their health was improving by practicing it.
Before we really get into the novel that you wrote, I wanted to say that many of the Fortune 500 companies actually have put Tai Chi into their workplace to allow people to feel better mentally and physically.
I've heard that, and I've heard a lot of companies. Now, the Chinese companies have been doing this for years. The Asian, Japanese, and Chinese companies have been incorporating martial arts and Qigong as a way just to take a break from the regular office routine and allow their employees to de-stress.
Yes, we definitely all need it. You said that you decided that this was a way, writing the book, was a way of actually introducing some of the principles of Tai Chi into that novel so that people could possibly incorporate it into their lives or at least learn about it.
Yes. Well, martial arts, when you start to study it, incorporates a lot of wonderful, has a lot of wonderful attributes. In fact, if you read the Tao, it's all about becoming empty, and it's a whole different philosophy of life than Western culture is used to. And it incorporates a lot of those principles.
Many people, as I said, are really trying to embrace the Eastern philosophies and also the exercises. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with the characters for your book.
Well, my novel, Tai Chi, the Story of a Chinese Master in America, is about a Chinese martial arts master who moves to New York City in the mid-1960s. To open a Tai Chi school and reconnect with his Asian-American family in Chinatown. And in the process, he becomes a mentor to his 2 young nephews, both of whom are drawn into his adventures while he adapts to life in America. And the elder nephew, who narrates the story, recalls a hectic period of his life growing up in New York City with a master and a student. And the novel was inspired by accounts of Grandmaster Chen Manqing and his American students in New York. Now, let me give you a little bit of background about Chen Manqing. He was a Chinese Tai Chi master who brought his art from mainland China to New York City in the 1960s. and opened a school in New York City. And the stories I read about him through other people's books provided inspiration for me to write this fiction novel.
There's a lot of judgment about people in America. We say that there is supposed to be no class distinction. In fact, many people left Britain to come over here because they wanted to not have those different classes. But we see people and the way they dress and the way they behave, and we make a judgment when, in fact, in your book, we learn a lot about judgment.
Yes, we do have a tendency to do that. That's true. We tend to make snap judgments based on the way people are dressed and so forth. That's very true.
You do many things. You are a pianist, and you also work with some very prominent jazz and pop musicians, and yet you flip your life in another way because music bathes the soul, and you do this exercise. How were you able to take what you do in music, for example, and incorporate it into the book as well? Is there flavors of that you meant to incorporate in the book?
Well, the interesting thing with Tai Chi and music is Tai Chi has its sort of form of inner music that you're practicing too. And a lot of people do like to practice Tai Chi with music accompanying it. But I like to practice it in silence because I feel that it has its own inner music. And as far as it relates to my practice of music, it seems to deepen my concentration and allow me to focus more when I play.
Normally, people that do music are really inspired by music. They go deep, I think, in listening to the sounds. But the sounds of silence really do make a difference in one's life. And that is one of the things that I see running, or a thread that runs throughout the entire book, because we're thinking of the martial arts practices of yesteryear.
Right, exactly. And it's often said when you're composing music and when you're playing music that it's the spaces between the notes that really create the music.
The nephew is able to learn many things through the Tai Chi principles. What are some of those principles?
Well, patience, I think. The Master Kuo embodies these principles and imparts them very subtly by example. And the first time that we see him sort of impart that, or the first example that we see of the Master Uncle Kuo's behavior, is in the beginning chapter of the book, where his nephews hear that he was a famous martial artist in China. And as he arrives off the boat, the customs agent treats him rather rudely and belligerently, but he remains humble and keeps his cool in dealing with this situation. And this is how his nephews learn their first lesson about him.
The very fact that he dressed meagerly with just an overcoat, not worrying about how other people saw him, teaches you a lesson right off the bat as well. Exactly.
Well, this is natural for him. This is not something unusual for him. This is just the way he dresses. And he's not a pompous type guy in any way, shape, or form. He's not a show-off. He's not a fancy dresser. He just dresses in the way that is natural and comfortable and traditional for him in the Chinese way.
But it also shows the absence of ego.
That's absolutely correct. He is an educated guy, which in China at that time, being a martial artist, a lot of martial artists were not very educated. And he is an educated guy, and not only that, he was rumored to be the bodyguard of Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And so he is also a government official, but he doesn't come off that way. He doesn't come off with any airs or anything like that.
Definitely, he does not. And I think that is a really big lesson for a lot of people. My mother was one that used to say to us that there ain't no sense in looking poor and being poor at the same time. And, you know, people judge you by what you put on. And if you are talented in throwing things together, a lot of people are surprised because they do judge the book by the cover.
Yes. Well, that's a wonderful thing that your mother told you, and it really is a life lesson. Is that you should be someone who is a being person more than a doing person.
And many of us saw The Karate Kid, and I don't like to make comparisons, but when I first read the book, I thought, this reminds me a little bit of The Karate Kid.
There are some comparisons, except that this book takes place in a completely different time period. It takes place in the 60s, and the first people to bring attention to the martial arts were our servicemen stationed in Okinawa during World War II. And they first brought their knowledge of judo and Tai Chi to Americans at that time. And you must remember when Kuo came to our shores in the 1960s, nobody had ever heard of Tai Chi. It was absolutely something new that no one had even heard about.
And it's funny that it's set in the 60s because that was a time of revolution, spiritual revolution, as well as other types of revolution. We were all looking for nirvana.
Exactly. Well, this is kind of where the master trades one cultural revolution for another, is that he flees the cultural revolution in China where martial arts are actually outlawed. It's against the law to practice martial arts at that time, during Mao's time. And he makes his home in the United States where the hippie movement is in full swing. And it's a completely different type of cultural revolution that he faces. There's a passage in the book where he says he looks out, sea of beads and beards, and wonder if he's getting through to them.
I love that. And there's culture shock when we leave our regular homeland and we come to another place. And that it had to be culture shock. How did you write that from the point of view of the nephew?
Well, I identify with that a little bit because I experienced that myself. I'm an expat, and I was raised in England and Brussels, Belgium. I came over to the States when I was a baby still at 6 months old. I left the United States, and came over to England. I was raised in England and Brussels, Belgium, until I was 14. And my father retired and came over to Florida and retired in Florida. And I came over to the States when I was 14, so I can identify a little bit with some of that cultural change, although it was much more rigorous for someone coming from China, of course, than coming from the East.
Absolutely. Very, very different. But to be able to fit in or adapt and overcome is a big thing. It really shows that a person can do it, but it takes discipline, and discipline is another one of those things that we learn with the martial arts practices.
Yes, that certainly comes into it. Learning from your friends, learning how they interact socially, and martial arts keeps you centered and keeps you grounded in the principles that you adhere to in everyday life, and it's your touchstone, and that's what you adhere to, that's what you stick to.
In your press release was a quote that made me think of Karate Kid. That's what really put me into it, but it was a quote by the nephew as he was doing a recollection when he was teaching the class, the upper body like a butterfly's wings, legs like steel. I had a visual of that. It was just amazing.
You could almost compare that to the wax on, wax off statement that the teacher is making in the Karate Kid. It's just a method, again, how to comport yourself in that style of martial art is you want to be soft, your upper body wants to be soft and pliable, and the legs want to be strong so that you're very, very centered and that your center of gravity can't be disrupted. But they compare Tai Chi from a martial standpoint to a swinging gate or a broken gate where you press on one side of the gate and the other side comes around to hit you in the rear end.
And that was exactly what I was thinking about the wax on, wax off, because even recently we had an entertainment in this area where we had some Bollywood dancers come, and they were showing you how to make certain moves, and it also reminded you of the Karate Kid. Then on top of it, recently I was in a physical therapy setting, and I watched someone as they were trying to get healthy again, and they were on a ball and then on another apparatus where they were trying to balance, almost like the crane.
That's very interesting. Tai Chi teaches you how to retain your balance basically on one foot, and the movement of Tai Chi is going, basically placing the weight on one foot fully and then transferring it to another foot fully. And they call the movement they refer to as moving like a string of pearls. In other words, we teach you the postures, and then you make the transition from one posture to the next posture, almost as if each posture was a pearl that you're making a transition into.
When you wrote the novel, did you have a particular demographic that you were hoping to reach, or did you just want to tell the story about the balance, about the principles of Tai Chi?
Well, I thought if I could create a family story around it, because Americans and Westerners in general don't know a lot about Tai Chi. They know what they hear. They hear like sort of little bits of things, and lots of it don't make any sense. Whereas if you say yoga to somebody, they almost know exactly what it is. But Tai Chi is a little bit more obscure, and it's a little bit more mystical, and that's what I like about it. And I wanted to craft a family story around it. Basically, this is not a Tai Chi textbook, but a family story, and that's what I want to emphasize. It's an enjoyable family story, and my girlfriend calls it Kung Fu meets Laura Ingalls Wilder, because it's really centered around this Chinese family, and they have a wonderful relationship with each other, and Tai Chi is sort of the nucleus that keeps all of that together.
Absolutely. And we know that many of us, at least, have been to San Francisco and other parts where there is really a Chinatown. And you see how clannish everyone is and how they try to keep the old customs alive.
Yes, I think that's one of the beautiful things about San Francisco is that happens in a lot of different ethnic areas of the city, is they try to keep those traditions alive. And I think those traditions are very valuable, and they all have something to teach us.
You know, I think that many of us are trying to reach back to that era. And you mentioned this taking place in the 60s when all the revolutions were going on. They're going on in our head. They're going on all around us. And people have wanted so badly, I have seen of late, wanting to go back to those 60s years. All of a sudden, we see baby boomers especially trying to grab a piece of that tradition, of that spirit of change, but also to incorporate the spiritual, which is what it was all about.
Mm-hmm. I think people have a longing in this day and age to go back to where life was more simplistic. We really got so much out of enjoying the small things in life. And I know that Van Cliburn, who is one of my favorite pianists, always said that mundane things thrill me to death. And as I get older in my later years, that's exactly the way I feel.
And that's one of the things I loved about the book, because simplicity is what we're all longing for right now. And I often speak to baby boomers because I happen to be in that age group. And I think about how we've all climbed the corporate ladder or sought after all of those dreams, when in fact, when we read a story of a family like this where simplicity and principles rule, that we all long to be a part of that. We want to bring it back into our own lifestyle because it's all been about stuff.
I think you're absolutely right with that. And we tend to bring on a lot of stress in our lives these days because there's so much going on and there's so much input going on that our brains almost have a hard time sorting through all of it. And all of our stress is self-created. And I think this is why so many of us long for a simpler life.
You said that some would say that Tai Chi is an exercise or a meditation, or some even say it's esoteric.
Yes. Well, it's really actually none of those to me. To me, it's just really a nuts and bolts exercise that I practice for health that is constantly rejuvenating.
Well, I like the way your girlfriend brings in Laura Ingalls, because it really does fit with that. I hadn't thought of it, but it is about the simplicity of life, about simpler times, about people learning from or being mentored by those elders that are there. And we need to do that again. We're not having it happen with broken families and so forth. And your book gives people an opportunity to drink that in and embrace it and learn how to maybe help their nephews or even a neighbor child that has no father or mother.
That's true. And we have so much to learn from that lifestyle. And it's amazing how quickly we identify with a simpler life and how much we enjoy reading about it and learning about it.
We really do, and I love that you have put this book out at this particular time, because I think everything is about timing. And as I said, so many people are reaching back, looking back, if you will, to their roots in the 60s, what happened, all the change that was going around, everything that we saw. And even the young people of the day can benefit from your book because they want this so desperately. They are tired of the hype. And I often say we call ourselves here at KVSL real radio for real people. We see that people love the reality shows, and the reason they like them, I believe, is because they want everything to be real. They don't want people to tell the lies. They want people to go to the very lowest common denominator, if you will.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you bring up the timing of this book. It's actually taken me almost 7 years to get this book published. And I had been through so many rejections with publishers, but I knew that I should just be persistent because everybody that I knew who read it, members of my family and friends, just loved it. And it's almost kismet because it seems that now is really the time when people can appreciate the message that this book has to offer.
Isn't it funny how things may delay us, or we could even go to a country song, because I have a friend that says that there's an old country song about every situation that you face in life, and it's thank God for unanswered prayers, because you probably really had a burning desire to get it out there, but now I believe it can make more of an impact again with timing than any other time.
That's very interesting, and I love that. And there's an old saying that says, infinite patience brings immediate results.
And I love that quote. I think it's wonderful. It's been such a wonderful Sunday morning to be able to spend with you to share this with our listeners. I know they'll be out there trying to find this book. And of course, they can get it on Amazon and I imagine at most bookstores.
At all the regular retail outlets, Barbara. And thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Well, I have to ask you this. Do you have another book in the works?
Well, I have a couple of different ideas for books. Of course, it's always easy to get ideas, but putting them down in a form where readers will be interested in actually reading them is a very hard thing to do. But yes, I do have a couple of things that I'm working on right now. One is a memoir, and one is about is a YA book about three kids who have very special gifts and very special powers. And I have one more book called Plant Life about a man who lives with his son and his daughter-in-law, and they want to put him in a nursing home. And he is looking actually for a way to take his own life through poisonous plants. And he comes upon a woman, or he reads about a woman who is lecturing about poisonous plants, and they meet, and that's how the story starts.
Well, you've gotten me excited. I can't wait to hear more about those. I'll be looking for information on that. But I want to tell you, once you get that first book published, especially when it takes a long time to get it out there, doors open and you can bring forth those works that you have given us ideas about today. I want to tell you, Marc Meyer, it has been a real pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for reminding us of simplicity and principles that really matter.
Well, same here. Thank you so much, Barbara, and it's been wonderful talking with you, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.